Based on the understanding of constructivist learning theory, that children interpret new information from the perspective of what they already know, we are now going to move into how babies develop the communication they need to interact with the people in their lives, how children acquire oral language. There are three prevailing theories about how children acquire language. The first one is that of the behaviorist theory. This theory purports that babies do not learn to talk until they listen to their parents who coach them, that learning language is completely nurtured. Mommy and Daddy will be cooing at their baby, "Oh, baby, baby, say baby," and the baby says, "baby." And then everybody goes completely crazy and rewards the child with smiles and hugs and kisses, and the baby figures out, "Wow, that was good. Let's do that again." On the other end of the spectrum is the nativist theory built upon Noam Chomsky's ideology that learning language is completely a function of nature. Human babies are born hardwired to learn how to talk, that human babies will learn how to talk under any circumstance. Unfortunate circumstances of children who were raised in unusual circumstances without social interaction have shown us that those children have great difficulty learning how to talk. In fact, their vocabulary becomes completely repressed. They are never able to progress beyond what is considered a 3-year-old's level of talking, that is, using very simple sentences and incorrect grammar. The social interactionist theory melds the two. Language acquisition is neither entirely nurture nor entirely nature. Humans are hardwired to learn language, and that places in the brain are completely dedicated to learning how to talk. Part of being human is talking, but we won't learn how to talk unless other humans interact and communicate with and to us. Language acquisition is an intricate dance between nature and nurture that enables the human baby to learn how to talk. Language is truly marvelous. It's very complex, and one of the things that defines us as humans. It is much more than the sum of its linguistic parts. However, as proficient readers and writers, we've internalized all those linguistic parts and intuitively expect language to make sense based on what we've already learned. Teachers of young children need to know how to break down those linguistic parts so we can understand the process children go through as they acquire language. The first of the 5 linguistic components in the English language that I'm going to talk about is phonology. Phonology is the sounds that make up a language. There are 44 different sounds that the 26 letters and combinations of letters in our alphabet make in English. For example, the letter S can make 3 different sounds. One is the beginning sound in the word soft, S. Another is the ending sound in the word girls, Z. And the last is the sound of the digraph SH as in the word sugar. Variations emerge across different dialects. For example, the folks down in the South can really do some unique things with vowels, intending them to be quite long and quite different than what you would hear if you were up north. The people in New England have their own version of pronouncing or including the sound of the letter R. The ability to learn language is quite fascinating. Even more fascinating is that children can learn 2 and sometimes 3 languages as easily as they are able to learn 1. All they need is to be exposed to the languages that are in the home. So, for example, if Mom speaks English and Dad speaks Spanish, and both parents speak both languages to the child will not be particularly confused, but will form the phonology base in the brain to hear, understand, and speak both languages. Knowing this amazing fact enables us to advocate for parents to speak to their child in the language that they feel most comfortable with and are most able to use with capacity and facility, and know that their child will acquire both. I am sure that all of you have heard that talking baby talk to a baby is not very good for language development. But let's take a look at the difference between baby talk and parentese. Baby talk is not human speech, and it has no meaning. It is remarkably fun and compelling to coo and goo over a baby with, "Oh, de beep beep boo boo baby belly." However, parentese is very different. Parentese is actually human speech, but it is exaggerated. It has a higher pitch, it's slowed down, and it has a sing-song quality. It allows baby to see and hear language connected to a specific event. For example, "Oh, look at those baby toes." Usually, the parent is pointing to the toes or touching the baby's toes, and the slowed down tempo helps baby to get a linguistic map, a phonological map of language, and to begin to hear carefully the word boundaries. So actually, parentese, which, by the way, is used in all cultures in all countries around the world, is a natural way that parents scaffold language acquisition for their children. It is a universal practice that helps children to begin to hear their language, to begin to establish word boundaries, to connect language to experience, and communicate with the people in their lives. The next linguistic component we'll talk about is that of morphology. Well, morphology deals with the parts of words that carry the meaning, the units of our language. These include root words like cycle, prefixes added to the front of a root word that change the meaning, like bi, added to cycle to make bicycle, and suffixes added at the end of root words that also change the meaning, like ist at the end of cycle to make cyclist. Other examples of common prefixes are mal, which means bad, re, which means again, and non, which means not. Across cultures, we find original words that linguists suggest came from one common ancestor tribe from over 10,000 years ago. There are words in our language like mom, mama, mo that describe a female caregiver, and no, niet, and no mean no. Hello, hello, and hola are remarkably similar sounding words that have the same or almost the same meanings. Children begin to learn that words have meaning when they are able to determine distinct word boundaries. Up until that point, when the child is about 6 or 9 months of age, children often hear what we say as a very beautiful song, but until they can begin to identify word boundaries or actual words in what we are saying, they have a hard time understanding what specific sound combinations mean. The next linguistic component that we are going to talk about is syntax, or the structure of our language, how we order words in sentences, like the grammar part of our language. Syntax varies from language to language, but it is consistent within a language. For example, in English, adjectives precede the noun, as in the red ball. In Spanish, the adjectives follow the noun, as in the ball of red. Semantics, or the meaning of our language, is the next component. Semantics refers to the shades of meaning that words convey. For example, wind, moving of air, can be described in many different ways depending on its intensity. For example, you can experience a gentle spring zephyr, a breeze, a gust, and a gale. They're all different nuances of the word that show difference in the meaning of the specific word. The final component that we're going to talk about is that of pragmatics. That is, the social rules that enable language to accomplish real-life purposes. Pragmatics refers to the social uses of language, such as eye contact, taking turns in conversation, the use of appropriate words in social conversation, taking on the perspective of the listener, nodding your head or shaking your head, saying that you understand, understanding and then appropriately using body language and expressions to communicate more than what is explicitly stated. So, for example, you will use pragmatics to interpret the meaning each girl in the next slide is trying to convey. Each girl is saying the same words, but their facial expression and body language lead you to believe they are conveying very different meanings with those words. Pragmatics may make up about 90% of what we communicate. That is, 90% of what we say is transmitted by our face, our body, and the inflection of our words. Okay, so how do we teach language to children? Well, as this very simple vignette shows, we teach language to children by speaking to them. As soon as a child is born, we begin the complex act of communication through cooing to them, singing to them, talking around them, and talking to them. We play with them, we read to them, we narrate what we are doing with them. All of these actions contribute to a child's growing ability to make sense of language through social interaction. Parents across all cultures around the world use parentese as they interact with their infants while eating, changing diapers, playing, bathing, dressing, and so on. These sweet and simple interactions are critical in helping children acquire language, learn new vocabulary, and use words to communicate. Most infants acquire language without any difficulty at all, but there are some reasons that language development may be delayed. Social influence is often the major reason for language delay. One of the things that accounts for differences in language development is gender. Often you will hear people say, "Oh, I have a little boy who's very slow in talking, but that's very normal for a little boy." Well, think about this. There was a study done back in the 1980s called Baby Pink and Baby Blue. These researchers recorded how adults treated the same baby when it was dressed in pink and how they treated that same baby when it was dressed in blue. When the baby was dressed in pink, the adults tended to coo and look at the baby in the face, talk to the baby, pay very close attention to the baby, and respond to facial gestures. When the baby was dressed in blue, remember exactly the same baby and the same set of adults, they bounced that baby, they jiggled that baby, they tickled that baby, but they spent very little face time talking to the baby. We've come to realize that we socialize infants by gender from the day they are born. Another very serious reason for language delay is odious media, which is an inner ear infection. One of your assignments in this lesson is to analyze a case study of language acquisition. This case study is based on Dr. Billy Yenz's daughter, Tiffany, when she was an 18-month-old. Odious media is not a passive problem. It is highly problematic in young children and may cause permanent hearing loss. This loss may prevent children from hearing subtle phonemes or the sounds of their language and thus delays acquisition. Let's take a look at this ear diagram. Section number 1 is the eardrum. An inner ear infection, or odious media, happens when fluid builds up and infection builds up behind the eardrum. It puts pressure on the eardrum, keeping it from being able to move freely and very sensitively. Hence, the malleus, incus, and the stapes are prevented from vibrating to pass information into the semicircular canals, which is then perceived as waves of sound. Part of the reason this happens with such persistence in young children is physiological. Babies have little faces. Sometimes babies' faces are compacted, and they don't elongate until the child is 2 to 4 years of age. Between 2 and 4, the jaw becomes longer, and the eustachian tube takes a downward slant. At that point, ear infections almost always begin to lessen in young children, but until that eustachian tube takes that long adult-like slant, it's very difficult for the ear to drain easily at the beginning of a cold. Another reason for language delay is congenital birth disorders. These usually take the form of deafness. Another congenital reason for language delay is a cleft palate. In most cases, that can be corrected now before the child is 6 to 9 months of age, so it doesn't prevent a child from hearing, but it makes it difficult for the child to form the sounds in the mouth. The human baby video segments of this lesson will continue the content of this PowerPoint presentation, and I think you will especially enjoy seeing what we've talked about performed by real babies.